Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am in on some rapid fire.
Here we go. So, Marcus Freeman talked a little about his quarterback competition after yesterday's first spring practice. He says there is no timetable for a decision on who will be the starter.
Name a starter when a starter clearly, shows that he's the best quarterback. I don't want to put a timetable on it, and I refuse to do that because to me, it's gonna. If you don't have a decision made by then, it's going to frustrate you, and there's no need to put a timetable on it. Let those guys compete, and when a starter is determined, we're going to announce it. But again, I'm excited. I truly love competition. I think it's going to make all three of those guys better. This is probably the first, it is the first true competition with three guys, that I've been a part of. But, I think it's going to be a fair competition. I know it's going to be a fair competition. And I'm really excited for and looking forward to, seeing how everyone in that room enhances, but also at some point somebody's going to be named a starter.
All right, so there he is talking about the quarterbacks. No timetable, Jesse. When do you think Marcus Freeman will actually announce the starter?
So I definitely think it'll come in the fall. And to begin fall practice, don't they go? I maybe this has changed, so forgive me, but I know under the previous regime, they would go down to Culver for a couple of weeks and then come back.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore. Yeah.
Okay,
they haven't done that for 5 or 6 years, I think, something like that.
I would say right around the middle of fall camp is when I think a decision would be made. So I think that's right around the time where you start getting into actual game plan and preparation for your opening game of the season.
I'm going to say, because when these things have gone into training camp, which I fully expect this will, I realize a lot of people are impatient and they think that a starter is supposed to be named yesterday, or, or at least by the end of spring. I don't see any benefit in naming the starting quarterback by the end of spring. One, there's just not that much time, and as Vince and I were talking about yesterday, Mike Denbrock, Gino Gaduli, they do have a greater body of work on these guys, because of the fact that they've been with all of them for at least a year, and the fact that they've been in the system and all that stuff. And there's a base of knowledge that they've got on these guys. But at the same time, Marcus Freeman, what's he always talking about? He loves competition, and not naming a starter keeps guys competing, keeps them battling for the job. But what's happened the last couple of times that they have gone into the fall and there has been a quarterback competition, typically they name it by the end of the first week. So that's kind of the time period that I'm looking at. By the end of the first week of fall training camp, I think we know who the starting quarterback is going to be. It's going to make for a long summer for some people, but I think that's when we find out.
And there's really not a lot to chew on based off performance in spring practice. I'm just being 100% honest with you. Yes, you can go through drills, and yes, you can, run the offense and that sort of stuff. But I think it has to be, how are these guys responding to kind of game plan specific stuff? Can they adapt? Can they understand what the defense is giving them? Can they study film? Can they go through progressions? I just think it's really easy to kind of memorize the answers when you're going against the same defense every day, and you're going against, you're going through the same movements every day. I want to see how you respond when some of the variables start changing a little bit, because again, anyone can go through the, what's kind of presented to them, day in and day out. But when you start changing things and you're going against another actual opponent and that sort of stuff, I think that's when you got to see how these guys respond to adversity a little bit.
DK says August 24th, 1:17 p.m. I think that's a few weeks too late.
Feels a bit tardy.
Yes. I'm going with by the end of the first week of camp. If I remember right, when Jack Cohn became the starting quarterback, they might have announced it, because he did a media session on a Saturday, and they might have announced it an hour before he came in, found out he was going to be the starting quarterback, if I remember right. Something along those lines. Now, granted, that's a different coaching staff and everything else, but ooh, Archer with a follow-up. What's the cutoff date for them to name a starter before you get worried about running a two-man rotation? Oh my gosh.
I don't think they'd ever go back to a two-man rotation, but I would start as they get towards the end of camp, I'd start to feel more and more worried because it's like, is there just no one separating themselves enough?
Yeah.
Is it all basically the same in terms of talent-wise?
Well, and the other thing, like I would not worry about a two-man rotation. I don't think that this staff would do that. But would they go gamesmanship leading up to Miami? Like not letting Miami know who it's going to be and just not announce a starter. Like they know internally who it's going to be.
Rot-row.
Yeah, like they know who's practicing and all that kind of stuff. Like, would they do something like that so that Miami has less to prepare for?
You're starting to stress people out more.
That didn't help anybody, right?
No.
Yeah. So like Steel City Coach says, do you think they would be able to wait until just before the first game week to name the starter, considering it's supposed to be a three-man race? I think by then one of the three is gone. Because like we've said it, and I think Andre had a comment. As long as there is open and honest competition and communication with the players, they'll know who the starter will be. And like we were saying, the number 3 guy, I think, is especially going to know, right?
Yeah, and I think, not to get too crazy deep into this, because I don't want to make a lot of proclamations, but if the 3 is one of the younger guys and the 1 is one of the younger guys, I think that 3 is definitely gone. Because Carr and Minchie have a lot of time left in front of them to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. And so if one of them is the 1 and the other one is the 3, which I likely think is going to be the scenario, because I think you'd put Angeli in the middle to be kind of a safety valve to a degree. And whether he takes that or not is up to him. But if you're on the flip side of that 1 or 3, you're out because you just have so much time left in your college career to go be a starter somewhere.
Exactly. All right, so here's a little bit more from Freeman on the quarterback competition. We'll just kind of keep this rolling.
I don't know if there's a perfect science that I'm able to tell you right now that this is exactly how we're going to do it. But the theme of it is they're all going to get reps with the 1s. They're all going to get reps that we split. And talking Kenny, Steve, and CJ. They're going to split reps. And each day could be different. But it's important for us to communicate with them beforehand. And no matter if they like what group they're going with or not, which it shouldn't matter, that we're upfront and honest with them, and then we give them feedback after each practice. And
so there you go. A little on the quarterback competition. I'm curious, Jess, when you heard that, did anything stand out to you? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious what may have stood out to you in that.
Yeah, I think it stood out that he made it clear that everyone's going to rotate with the 1s, so it kind of maybe gets rid of that that kind of mental depth chart that might be going through people's minds. So I like that each of these guys is going to get the opportunity to work with 1s. And also it's fair to them because, the 1s compared to the 3s, like the play can be made potentially by, the wide receivers just not being skilled enough to be able to produce. So I think it's fair to get everyone reps with the 1s. And I honestly liked, what also stood out to me is that the transparency and feedback of him or all the quarterbacks and probably Gino Guidugli sitting down after practice and saying, hey, here's what was good. Here's what's bad. Here's what you need to probably, work on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And, like you said, you might not always like the group that you're in on any given day, but when you've got 3 guys, not everyone can be getting first team reps every day or, like a large share of first team reps. So there might be a day where you're getting third team reps and the other 2 are splitting 1s and 2s, but then the next day it might flip. So Andre is asking when the spring portal window is. The spring portal opens on April 16th and it runs through April 25th. So it is only 10 days this year, April 16th through the 25th. I'm sure that is the first of 24 times we'll get that question over the next 3 weeks. I thought it was interesting, though, yesterday, Jesse, we played that cut for Marcus Freeman yesterday, and people immediately inferred, based on the order that Marcus Freeman said the names of the quarterback, like that was who it was going to be.
It's funny, as soon as he went through the list and said Kenny first, I was like, who's going to say, because he said Kenny first?
Yep, exactly.
So what also stood out to me, though, is what you just talked about of everyone getting those reps with 1, 2, and 3. But I think it's important to evaluate how they do with the 2s and 3s as well, because I think you have to show a lot of mental maturity to still, do what you need to do. And, we always talk about playing down to competition or level of competition. I think that's extremely important in this quarterback battle, because these quarterbacks can still carry themselves and execute like they're with the 1s, but you have to mentally be able to do that and tell yourself, hey, like, even though I'm with the 3s right now, I need to conduct myself like a 1, essentially.
DK says if it's Minchie, he thinks Carr would stay, but in reverse, he doesn't think so. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I definitely think if Minchie's not in good standing, I think he's the one that's leaving. I think Carr, since this is still technically his true freshman year, right, because of the early enrollee stuff.
Well, as of right now, it's still his true freshman year. But going into next year, he's a sophomore, obviously.
Right. And so I would say I would what's the best way to put this? If it's Minchie, I would say there's a better chance of Carr staying if Minchie's the starter. But I think if Carr is the starter, Minchie's definitely gone.
It would make sense because he's going into his junior season now. And he was a top 100 guy. And I think it would be, the ultimate question is going to be, if it's Carr, does one guy leave? Does two guys leave? What's that going to look like?
I don't think Angeli's leaving, regardless of what happens.
You think he just loves it that much, huh?
I
know that he thinks that,
but what real starting opportunities
he's the guy too.
Are out there? Because he doesn't. It's not like it's Drew Pine where he's actually has a full year of tape to put on for some schools.
True.
So who's going to actually bite and take a risk on Steve Angeli, who played well against third strings in a meaningless bowl game?
Well, but there's still the end of the first half against Penn State that a lot of people put a lot of stock in. He's got film.
He played a good series. And,
no, I know.
Still took a bad sack and got bailed out by freaking Jagasol wrestling that ball away from someone underneath.
And that's the thing. No matter where he goes, I don't think that he's going to step in and just be given a starting job anywhere.
Or just dominate like he's the true starter.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to stick with it. I think Angeli is on this team through next season, no matter what.
Yeah, like DJ says Toledo, and Steel City coach, yes, Angeli is going into his senior year. DJ says Toledo, and I'm not being snarky about this at all, but honestly, I think that like for Angeli to have that kind of opportunity to transfer someplace and play right away, that it's probably going to be that level school.
Right. It's probably not going to be a Power 4.
It's going to be a step down. Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at the end of the day. It's just what his personal.
But his career is getting toward the end, like if he has his degree and he wants to play and it's not going to happen, then I think it seems more likely than not that he would go.
Yeah. Just know you heard it here first. My declaration has been made.
All right. Yeah, and this See, this is why I agree with what Steel City said. What you're going into your senior year, if you're not going to be the starter, why would you stay again and just lose another year of eligibility when you could go someplace and still have 2 to play somewhere potentially? I know he loves Notre Dame and wants to be the starting quarterback here and all that, but like if that's not in the cards, I would think that he's going to want to go play someplace. So the new 105-man roster limits are coming to college football next season. And Marcus Freeman touched on this a little bit yesterday. He was asked if there are guys who are fighting for roster spots this spring.
I'm sure, but you waste time daydreaming about an uncertain future. Who cares? You should be focused on being the best version of you. And I don't care if you're worried about being on the 105, you're worried about being a starting quarterback, or you're worried about being the backup tackle and you're a true freshman. Stop wasting time on things that don't matter. The future's uncertain. So focus on being the best version of you today. That's all that matters. Don't worry about what group you're going with. Don't worry about maybe I'll be cutting the 105. Focus on being the best version of you, and the rest will take care of itself.
All right, Jess. So if you're a player, if you're a guy who's not solidly in the 2 deep this spring, how are you approaching things when you're out there at practice?
As much as I love Marcus Freeman, I hate that answer that he gave at the end, or at the end of it, because it's just so easy for a coach to say that, because at the end of the day, they're not getting cut. They're still out there every day, and they're making the decisions on who is going to get cut. And yes, every player wants to practice hard and give the best version of themselves and earn themselves a spot. But as someone who's gone through it, like, you're constantly thinking about those things, about where you are in the rotation. Am I going to be getting playing time? Am I not going to be getting playing time? Like, again, like, I love Marcus Freeman, but it's kind of a selfish answer just to say, I need you to work hard for Notre Dame and the rest will take care of itself. But that's not true.
Because there's still a chance it's not going to take care of itself.
It's not going to take care of itself for some people at the end of the day. And so it's really hard. It's a tough situation. But if I'm a player, in that situation, and I'm, I don't know if I'm solidly on the 2 deep, I just think you gotta practice as hard as you can and demand as much transparency and feedback from your coaches.
Yeah,
because
you might have to be a pain in the butt. You
got to make a decision at some point that maybe you need to leave and go get into a rotation somewhere else.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? It's like you might just have to be a flat out nuisance, like if that's where you are. But it's like, I need evaluation. I need to know what
especially
I need
with the
to
portal
improve on.
Opening in about a month and a half.
Yeah, I'm running number 3 right now, and I haven't had a chance to, bump up to number 2. What do I need to do to get there? All those things, and that's exactly it. I think you've got to kind of approach it like your career is on the line, basically. Excuse me, because I went through, and it's a 105-man limit. The roster that we were given yesterday has 107 names on it, and there are more coming this summer with the rest of the freshman class and, a couple more transfers coming in. So you're going to be up pretty much around where they've been the last few years, around 115, 118, in that range is where it's going to be. And 105 is the limit. So, again, like if you're in that walk-on category, if you are in that, you're running, number 3 or below, you're not even on the 2 deep. I think you've got to approach it like every day. You've got to go out there like you're going to prove yourself, and your roster spot is on the line. You're trying to stay above that cut line.
And at the end of the day, like, I'm not trying to, take a knock at Marcus Freeman. I
know exactly what you're saying, because you come at it, like you said, from a player's perspective. There's a coach's perspective and there's a player's perspective.
And I really don't think there's a good answer to the question at the end of the day. Like, I don't think that there's something that he can say that doesn't kind of suck, And that's kind of what Joe basically just said. Like, there's not really a good answer in that. When you're talking about guys who are going to get cut and potentially need to know because they could go get an opportunity elsewhere. Like, you do need to just focus on yourself, and a lot of things probably will naturally take care of itself. But at the end of the day, it's not going to for a group of people,
Right.
and so
You can do everything exactly right, and it's still not going to work out for you. Is
Right.
what you're saying. Yeah, and that's just like
the nature of the business.
I saw some coach today from the this pro spring league, the XFL or whatever, UFL or whatever it's being called, and he talked about the fact that he had to cut 15 guys and he hated it, and like the fact that they all deserve to play in the league and all this different stuff, which it's a great sentiment. It was awesome that he said that, but at the same time, I'm sure that those guys are, it's like the exact same situation that you're talking about. At the end of the day, it's a business, and you're either in or you're out. You either make it or you don't. That's what it comes down to. And some guys, like you see it every year on Hard Knocks. They don't do it as much this year, but there are guys who absolutely work their butts off on Hard Knocks and do everything that they can and still get cut. And the other side of it is there's guys who've got a ton of talent who, don't necessarily work as hard as they can, but because they've got a little bit more talent, they get the benefit of the doubt.
There's more ceiling, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And you're willing, the coaches are willing to live with that ceiling. That's right. Fill in the blank. The most important thing you need to see from Notre Dame women's basketball when they open up NCAA tournament play Friday against Stephen F. Austin is blank.
I need to see intensity. I need to see them locked in and playing every game like it's a Final Four, an Elite Eight matchup. I just need to see that intensity. They need to be intense and play the same style of basketball no matter who the opponent is. And I think that all kind of starts with intensity, mental intensity, physical intensity, playing hard on defense, playing physical on defense, leading to, transition points, getting out to a lead, playing the style of basketball that they like to play on offense. But, we talked on Tuesday and we talked about how the defense really has to be the catalyst that gets things going. Mm-hmm. And I think when you talk about defense, the number one word that comes to mind is intensity and just playing hard and strong, no matter, who you're playing, how big of a lead you might have throughout the entire game. They just need to continue to focus on playing intense, hard basketball, starting now, and just not really look at the opponent, but look at, this is the game that we need to play. And this is the game that we need to play, consecutively throughout the tournament. But obviously you got to handle it one game at a time.
So you're saying go out there and put in the work and, don't worry about the results?
Play your brand of basketball and things will take care of itself.
That's right. They just got to get that swagger back, because it just felt like they lost that game to NC State, and it just felt like it pushed them back on their heels for the next couple of weeks, and obviously resulted in 2 more losses after that. But part of their swagger is when they just get out and run. It does start with defense, and that's where the real intensity has to come. They've got to find that defensive intensity and turn it into fast break points. They've outscored their opponents 602 to 183 in fast break opportunities this year. That's plus 13.5 points per game. In their wins over teams that ended up being 2 number 1 seeds, Texas and USC, and UConn, which ended up being a number 2 seed, they outscored those 3 teams 50 to 22 in fast break opportunities, plus 9 per game. In their 3 losses, they only had a 51 to 37 fast break advantage. So about half of what they were doing. They just get the stops, get out and run. That's where they get their confidence. That's where things flow from, is starting at the defensive end of the floor and then just get out, run, get that swagger back by being able to run it up and down the floor. Get the track shoes off. They've had 2 weeks off, so they're plenty rested, and they should be hungry and ready to go because they're still one of the most talented teams in the entire field.
Agreed.
Do you buy or sell the first 2 days of March Madness being better than Super Bowl Sunday?
I do just out of a straight quantity aspect. I get how many games are there in the first round? Like 32 games. I just naturally have to say, like, because there's more quantity and there's always upsets and there's always, crazy stuff going on. And also, like, everyone buys into the basketball. Like, not everyone buys into the Super Bowl.
I mean, you had a work party today where people brought in burgers and you watched games at work, like you don't get to do that during the Super Bowl.
And the amount of, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but the amount of women coworkers that I have that were interested and said, I filled out a bracket and I'm following it. Like, I just don't think you get the same participation that you do in a Super Bowl.
I agree. And just like you said, from a pure volume standpoint, like Eastern time, the games are starting a little after noon and it runs all day the first 2 days. And that's why it's awesome. Like if you're on the freaking West Coast, it starts at 9 a.m. and it runs all day. Like I would love to be out there on the West Coast, being able to watch those games all day. It's like as a guy who works from home, it's obviously easy for me. I can flip on the TV and do whatever, kind of have it on in the background. They're definitely, like, the first 2 days of March Madness definitely better than Super Bowl Sunday because it's wall to wall for 2 full days. And then it's, not far off that going into the weekend as well.
I need you to throw up that comment from Cameron Ford in the chat. He's making me blush here a little bit. And I appreciate his kind words.
Oh, Cameron noticing. Yeah.
I've dropped about 20 pounds so far, and I got many more to go. So, Cameron, I want you to tune in like 6 months from now, and you'll see a very chiseled chin.
Back into fighting form. That's right. All right. So the Detroit Lions have proposed a significant change to the NFL playoff seeding process that would largely use regular season records as the guidance rather than division championships. Under this proposal, the division winner with the conference's best record would get the number 1 overall seed. But after that, teams would be seeded by records regardless of whether or not they won their division or received wild card berths. Now, this is different, of course, because like right now, like a wild card team could have a better record than a division winner, but you would still have to go on the road and not get to host a game. For example, the division winner would always get to host. So, do you buy or sell the idea?
You know what? I think I actually really like this idea. And it kind of models the NBA to a degree because they don't do divisions anymore. It's just East and West, and they go, purely 1 through 8, the best of them. But the reason why I like this for the NFL is because I don't think it's fair for teams that play in a division like next year, the Broncos, Chiefs, and Chargers. That's going to be a crazy division.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fair to them.
They were all in the playoffs this year, and they should all be much closer together next year.
And I don't think it's fair to punish a team just because they happen to be in a tougher division comparatively, right? Because like we've seen, I think it's happened in the NFC East before with a team with like a losing record or potentially like a 500 record when it was a 16-game season, 8-8 could win the division. But
Seahawks hosted the Saints maybe 10 or 12 years ago, where they had it was either a losing record or I think they had a losing record and the Saints had, a winning record, for example.
And so I think it's great because it rewards still being a division winner, but then also it doesn't just give you this it's kind of like, in my opinion, the predicament or the argument that we had with the college football format this last season of conference winners automatically got the top 4 bye seeds.
Right.
When there were better teams behind them, but just because, the ACC champ happened to win, they're now sneaking in a bye or something like that. And so
exactly.
I think it translates well to say, okay, well, we'll reward you for being a division. You'll get a ticket to the party, but that doesn't mean that you just automatically get.
But you're going to go to the bottom of the seeding. Yeah, that's right. Like if you're the team with the worst record, you still get in by winning your division, but you're not going to be rewarded with a home playoff game. You're going to go to the bottom. And, like part of this is, because of the fact that the Lions were 14-2 and they lost and, who they had to play and all that kind of stuff. I think it makes sense, especially like when you look at the way the NBA does it, they just seed it straight down the line. There are still divisions, but they just seed it straight down the line. It doesn't matter which division you happen to come from. And, I think that it works out really well. And I think that this would be a really good idea. It would more reward who's actually had the better season, than who happened to be, like the best team in a horrible division kind of thing. I don't think that I've always thought that you shouldn't reward that. But again, bad division winner would still get in the playoffs. You just wouldn't get to host a playoff game. You'd have to go on the road someplace. So Jimmy Johnson, of course, recently retired from the Fox NFL pregame show. Do you buy or sell Fox finding a replacement for Johnson on the show for next season?
I sell it. And I think like CBS, Fox was kind of approaching too many people.
Yes.
And I think it was a natural kind of way to trim the fat, to be honest with you. And I think you've been kind of training Gronk up a little bit. You've got, I think, Jay Glazer's role becomes more and more prominent. It feels like every year.
I mean, obviously you still have Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long and Michael Strahan in there as well. Like, do you really need a fifth guy?
I'm more of a fan of less is more in those situations. I don't need 6-7 guys over there, blah, 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 blah. Just give me that solid core and just kind of let it ride out, Like it sucks to lose Jimmy Johnson for obvious reasons. I think he's, he was a Cowboy, but I think he's really good at his job too at the end of the day. Provides a lot of experience, obviously. And so losing him does stink. But at the end of the day, it's a good way to kind of, like I said, trim that fat a little bit.
No, I agree. I think they've got enough voices and faces in that show. There's already, with that many guys, because you also have the host in Kurt Menefee. So you've got Menefee, Bradshaw, Long, Strahan, Gronk, and Glazier. I didn't even realize they had that many. And then when they had Jimmy Johnson, they had 7. Like, you don't need 7 people in an hour-long pregame show. Like I mean, they've probably still got too many with what they've got right now. Wait a few years after, like when Bradshaw finally retires and maybe Howie Long, maybe you go out and you bring in another coach or something like that. But I don't think there's any reason to replace Jimmy Johnson in that pregame show. I do agree, Joe, that they could get rid of Gronk. Like, he is.
Isn't he trying to make a comeback or something? Or is that a rumor?
I don't even know. I mean, they obviously, he's got the personality and, they want younger guys and he's played more recently, but it's just not that good, to be quite honest. And I realize, like he's willing to kind of play the buffoon, but I think it gets played up too much.
It's old after a while.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. It's blank that according to sports media reporter Michael McCarthy of Front Office Sports, Aaron Rodgers is drawing very little interest from sports media outlets as his career nears an end. One media executive reportedly said, quote, "He could be a great analyst, but he's insufferable," end quote.
It's the least bit surprising, in my opinion, because I think the one word that is perfectly sums up Aaron Rodgers, it's insufferable. And at the end of the day, here's what he really is when it boils down. He's highly opinionated, but he's also dry and stale at the same time. Like,
that's true.
Like it's you could be opinionated, but he's not like Stephen A. Smith opinionated or Shannon Sharp opinionated.
You're not hanging on his every word kind of thing.
He's very dry. He's very boring. And there's not a lot of like open reception to other people's ideas. It's really his. And all right, you're kind of an idiot because you're not saying or agreeing with what I'm saying at the end of the day. So I mean, listen, Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame quarterback, great quarterback. But outside of that, he is just like, I just can't stand him. And I'm I'm glad that I think more and more people are starting to figure that out, because it's something I kind of believed in early on in his career, but he was still young and really good at football and won a Super Bowl and was an MVP and all that stuff. But now it's, more people are coming to the realization of kind of who Aaron Rodgers is. I'm not going to say I'm happy, but like, it's still kind of satisfying to hear other people say he's insufferable.
You just say it. Like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there's plenty of, like, Chicago Bears fans aren't going to have any disagreement with you there. Yeah, I mean, it's probably the least surprising thing ever. And, like you said, like when he would do those hour-long segments with Pat McAfee during the season, he just droned on and obviously went into different tangents and, would just like jump from one thing to the next. If you're going to be in one of these shows, you have to be very, like, again, 7 guys were in that pregame show in an hour-long show, for example. You have to be very to the point and succinct, make your point, have an opinion, get in, get out. That just doesn't seem like it's Aaron Rodgers' strengths based on anything that we've heard him say.
Everything drags out.
Yeah. Just do a podcast. Literally. It's all you have to do. Do a podcast if you're Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure plenty of people will jump on it. They can find out just how insufferable.
That's true. A podcast is perfect for him, because then his actual fans can follow along and the rest of us aren't forced to listen to him.
That's it. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. No show tomorrow because I've got the Notre Dame women's basketball game. And I think that there are conflicts with the other guys. So we will be back next weekend. We are going to get to talk to Gino Guidugli and the quarterbacks tomorrow morning over at Notre Dame. So we'll bring some of that out. We'll roll it out on next week's show on Monday. So we've got that to look forward to. More quarterback talk. I mean, like you weren't getting enough quarterback talk already. So have a great weekend and be safe. Have fun. March Madness. We will talk to you next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.